Here we go, shitting on Assassin's Creed. Look, people are finding out the tactic that's going on. It's like, oh, well, you have woke individuals that try to push their ideology through things that uh, are initially harmless. So it's like, oh, let's put ugly characters over the age of 50 in a video game. And if you have a problem with that, you're a coomer. This is done so moist critical doesn't bring you under the microscope. So normal people look at the people going against this and their reaction to these things and think they're crazy. But people are catching on because you have, and I made a video about this, a Japanese senator going like putting an investigation on Assassin's Creed Shadow for historical inaccuracies, and you gotta wonder why he's doing this. And I'm gonna try to explain to you why, because under most circumstances, it's a video game from yet another country that nobody cares about. But there's this very cancerous ideology that has spread. And it's relatively new, right? It's the ideology of, oh, everything that came before us is evil. America is an inherently evil, racist country, and everything made by America is very baddie bad bad, and your ancestors are very baddie bad bad, and therefore you need to pay for it. The things you like, the things you consume needs to pay to push this small, fringe, radical ideology that not even the majority of people who are even like left wingers agree with, but you're forced to agree with this because you surround yourself with people that agree with it, so you have to agree with it. And they're looking at a culture like Japan, right? A culture where not only do they revere their ancestors, they downright worship them like they believe their ancestors are effectively divinity. And they're not really far off the mark. I mean, you had people that existed that had a hell of a lot less amenities, a hell of a lot more problems, a hell of a lot less, you know, freedom, and a hell of a lot less, cultural unity. And from them, you spawn this country, this nation, this culture, you know, and the ideologies within. And, you can think there's something divine about it, but I mean, it's odd. Like, I remember reading this article where the Japanese were asking Americans, oh, you know where the ancestors of George Washington live? And they're like, we have no fucking idea who or what you're talking about. Like, no. And they found it weird. It's like, yeah, they know where the ancestors of their emperors, of their shoguns live. Like, it's in record. But they found it weird that we don't treat our Paul like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, our major figures that way. So if you have this culture which reveres their ancestors, and you clash with a culture and an ideology that believes everything that came before is systemically evil, systemically racist, systemically oppressive, and is just bad. Like there's absolutely nothing of value that came from America. Well, then you're going to have the Japanese being like, well, what the fuck? Fuck you for trying to impose this on us. And this is what, Assassin's Creed Shadows doing, right? It's trying to impose just this fringe radical ideology that has been pushed through like academia, so colleges, and profligated through the dorm rooms, along with the fucking debt. But it's also been pushed through media. It's why you have these ESG initiatives. It's why you have movies and games where they star the granny over 50-year-old and they do everything in their power to devalue America, devalue, heterosexual heteronormativity as they call it. I hate using their terms, but you know, it just being a straight man, anything that's straight, heterosexual, they demonize it and they push the opposite. And it sounds idiotic, but no, they legitimately think this way. Like I swear they do. It's why you have, you know, they have the games like Stellar Blade that comes out, and the people freak out, but the same people are fine with the Baldur's Gate sex scene. They're fine with OnlyFans, right? They're okay when it's a real woman showing her ass online. In fact, that's the only time you should be into that stuff. You can't like it in anime. You can't like it in entertainment. And you see these things, right? And you're like, okay, well, this is not correct. I mean, I'll say what you want to hear just so you don't spurg the fuck out. I understand you're doing the same thing because you surround yourself with other people that I don't even know if they think this way, but it is an interesting grift, right? Again, you're a professor who is on tenure, so you technically can't get fired, and you just sit and spout about bullshit. But again, the Japanese see these things, and it's like the situation with Cleopatra in Egypt, you know, where Netflix made a Cleopatra movie making her black, and they're like, what the fuck? She's not African. Like, we know she's white because she's royalty, and royalty is some of the most known people in American human history. But again, they're pushing this historical revisionism through entertainment and through art. And the point of this is to push an ideology. Like, the point of historical revisionism in this context isn't to, you know, make interesting stories or interesting characters. It's used solely to push this fringe ideology. And Egypt isn't going to take it. Japan isn't going to take this. But you had this situation where the guy, like, there's this guy, I think his name is Loxy. Like, he made changes this on Wikipedia because he just wanted to sell his book. So for quite a bit of time, people thought like, oh, Yasuke was a black samurai because the changes were made on Wikipedia to sell his book. But now people are like, oh, well, it wasn't actually the case. You have Japanese historians being like, this wasn't really the case. And if you try to ask for the, you know, if you try to ask for proof on Wikipedia, they'll just ban you. Like, you'll get a permanent IP ban. Like, they don't want the discussion, they don't want the debate. They just ban you. But you have this particular Japanese historian, right, who is trying to defend the Ubisoft product. He's trying to defend Assassin's Creed Shadow. So you have people who, of that ideology, flock to him and be like, oh, look, there's a Japanese historian, a singular Japanese historian that says he was black. Oh, and then so people are looking, they're looking into this guy, and okay, they find this man's a communist, like he is a member of the Communist Party in Japan. Yes, it exists, believe it or not. Japan has a communist party. He works for a company whose investors are like BlackRock, Banks of America, you know, the type of ESG banks and Vanguard, you know, that try to push ESG. And Sony, again, also is owned primarily by BlackRock. So you see these things, you're like, okay, so there must be a conflict of interest with these companies and the company that he's in, and with him in particular. And again, the word conflict of interest, just for some reason, Americans don't understand this. And it's something even I figured out. It's like, okay, so if you donate to a politician, do you not think that politician is now indebted to that company? But here it's called lobbying. Anywhere else on the planet it's called, you know, bribery, you know, or corruption. But anyway, I digress. And so people are seeing these things and they're like, oh yes, so the Marxist is defending this. And even other Japanese historians are going after this because he tries to water down the definition the of words, which is what most people of the ideology do. They take a word and they're like, oh yeah, let's water down the definition to its base components and be like, oh yeah, so I guess if you do that, this is true. So he's like, oh, if you picked up a sword, you're effectively a samurai. And with this line of logic, merchants were samurai, right? It's like, that's such an odd argument to have. And you're a historian, right? And again, Ubisoft themselves tried to puddle this game as being closely historically accurate. If they would have said, "Oh, this is historical revisionism," I don't think anyone. Well, would people would have bought it? Probably not. But I don't think anyone would have gave them shit. But no, they actively choose the controversy. Like they choose to fight. They choose to wage this ideological battle that they will lose, and they're losing on all fronts. Even the Japanese are setting up this bulwark and being like, no, we're not accepting this, right? Because we see your culture, and now you're trying to impose your culture on ours, and we are not allowing it. Like, this is also what American, like the woke individuals of America, like to do. They hate colonialism. They hate when we shove our hands into like other cultures, unless it's their small fringe radical culture. Then they'll do everything in their power. Like then they're like, yes, colonize the Japanese right now. Like you do that right now. And again, people are looking at this and being like, now hold on a minute. Now I think you've failed the argument now. Like I thought this was the things you were against, but now you're all for it when it comes to your idea. Again, it's such an odd thing that these individuals do. Like they're against something unless it pushes their thing, then they're for it. But I am so glad the Japanese and even other countries are pushing back against this because the fact of the matter is, not even the majority of Americans think this way, right? But it is the enforced standard. Like this way of thinking is enforced. It is taught. It is profligated, and people are getting sick and fucking tired of it. Right? But if you say anything about it, you're ostracized. You're attacked. You know, people go after you as if you're the big baddie, and you know most people just don't want to fucking deal with it. You know, the fucking schizophrenic individual who just wants to impose their daddy issues on everybody else. So they're, oh yeah, sure, he's a samurai, sure. Or they just don't interact. But, you know, the idea is to vote with your money and vote with your time. You know, there might be people that play this game. You know, they might be the normies that play Assassin's Creed Shadow. But I think it's gonna flop. But that's all I gotta say about this. Peace.